Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm, and you are watching sixth and final part of What If Anbu Naruto Accidentally Travel Back in Time. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Now, wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Neji glared. Naruto smirked. The smoke went away, and most of the people in the crowd started to cry. Neji's eyebrow kept moving, but he couldn't move or think straight because he was so angry. Yosh. Neji looked right into the eyes of his double, even though he would never do that himself. Naruto changed into something that he knew would make Neji angry. "I'm going to kill you," he snarled, staring at Naruto. Naruto's smile got bigger as he did the move that every ninja knows. Naruto did the good guy pose with Neji and made his teeth shine. Neji fixed his tights and pinged again. Yosh. Don't you see that fate has more power than youth? Oh, my sides hurt. Kyuubi howled with laughter. Now rub a little salt in that wound. When Neji got a small bump on the head, Neji lost it. Now the outfit was done. Neji gave the crowd a nice guy pose while wearing Guy and Lee's tights and having bushy eyebrows and a bowl cut. Guy yelled from the seats, "I've always dreamed of this day. Even if it's not him, I've longed to see Neji turn to the power of youth." Neji went for an attack, but it was easy to avoid. Naruto turned to face Guy and Lee and opened his arms. "Guy-sensei." Guy yelled back, Neji, with tears in his eyes. "Guy-sensei." Lee called. "Lee." Naruto said through tears. As he kept going with the call and answer, he thought, "I'm so glad they can't come down here and actually hug me." "Guy-sensei." Lee. Neji. Idiots. Ten. Tenten yelled, "Stay away from me," when she saw that Lee and Guy were coming towards her. As for Naruto, he was. Neji hit Naruto in the back of the head from behind while he was thinking about something else. Naruto took off in the air, and when he fell, there was a poof. Neji let out a sigh of satisfaction when he thought he had stopped the transformation, only to be shocked again by what was in front of him. Ack. That's even worse. Change back, change back. Up in the stands, Kakashi laughed and said, "Naruto does have a way of making bad things worse, doesn't he?" When Kakashi saw what had happened, he fell on his face and said, "Even I think that's a bit much." Sasuke gave the evil toy bear the evil eye. The black-haired nin had started using a different strategy. At this point, it didn't matter if he left his house or not. All he wanted to do was release himself. He had tried to move the bed and found that as long as he stayed on it, he wasn't attacked. It looked like his door had even more traps than the floor, which was bad news. As soon as he touched the doorframe, he got a small shock, so he decided to try another way. He used a broom he had found to push his bed over to the window. As he did this, he quietly thanked the gods that he had bought a bed with wheels. He got to the window without much trouble and touched the frame with caution. Nothing. Despite touching the glass, nothing happened. He opened the window slowly, but nothing happened. He was about to take off his jacket when he had an idea. "It's too easy," he said as he looked suspiciously out the window. He got up and put a pillow in the frame. When the window fell quickly, it squashed the pillow into the wooden frame. Sasuke instinctively crossed his legs tight and turned very pale. If he hadn't tried the window, there would have been no chance of his clan coming back to life. After he got over his surprise, he opened the window again and put his idea to the test. This time, he lifted the pillow off the frame and held it so it didn't touch any part of the wall. This time, when the window fell, Sasuke gave a small smile. "In some way, the space was censored," he said. He reached out and grabbed a clothes hanger as he looked around his room. He made the end straight and put it out the window. Clang. The window dropped. He grabbed the glass of water he had kept on his headboard, happy that there was still some left. He did his best to get a stream of water to come out of the window. Nothing. "So it doesn't stop liquid," he said out loud as he looked out the window as best he could without putting his head out to make sure no one was there. He sighed, "I hope I have good aim." Yosh. Rejoice in the springtime of youth. Naruto screamed as loud as he could while trying to keep a straight face. "Good idea, Fuzzball. If I'm lucky, this will make him furious. I can't believe you actually did it." The fox laughed without holding back. Tenten's muscles jerked fiercely, but she didn't know if she should cower in fear or pass out. Naruto. Everyone looked at Guy. He had his head down and looked like he was shaking. Most people thought he was crazy, so they moved away from the genin who was dressed in green. To use my image in such a way as to teach Neji a lesson. I'm honored. Guy had stars in his eyes and was crying a lot, which made everyone either stare at him blankly or look a little shocked and confused. Tenten stared at her sensei and shuddered. She shook her head and said, I'm pretty sure he's making fun of you just as much as Neji. Neji yelled, that has nothing to do with being young. As the smoke swirled around Neji's private area, Naruto blew him a kiss. Naruto batted his eyes and said, I call this my not sexy no jutsu. Someone in the crowd yelled, the image. It burn. Which made Naruto laugh. This loser's actions are going to give me nightmares. Never wanted to see Guy without clothes. Neji thought, I never thought I'd wish to be in spandex, as he tried to think of a way to hit without getting too close. Naruto yelled, come let me explain myself to you. As he moved very quickly towards Neji. When the smoke stayed around his waist, everyone in the crowd was grateful. Neji tried to get away, but he couldn't move quickly enough. It was impossible to even move into a Kaiden stance. The attack was a smashing success. To Neji's ego. Naruto yelled, youthful embrace. As he squeezed the pale-eyed nin. As Neji was being lifted off the ground, he kicked his legs hard, which was the only way he could think of to fight. After what seemed like a very long time, Neji finally made touch and broke the jutsu. Neji, who was gasping for air, said a quiet prayer that his terrifying experience would soon be over. He said, Humph. Nothing you do will be impossible. Neji looked around quickly, scanning everything with his Byakugan. Naruto was gone, and he let his worry get in the way. He looked everywhere for him, but he couldn't find him. He asked himself, behind? Above? Try below, said Naruto as he jumped up and pulled Neji down, burying him up to his neck. How could I be fooled by a fool? Being beaten by a loser is so sad, he grumbled as he tried to get away. Because you were so sure that a loser couldn't beat you, you expected to win easily and for me to do what you expected, Naruto said as he got down to eye level with the nin. Neji was angry and said, I still don't buy it. A loser is always a loser. There are no exceptions. Naruto smiled and said, that might be true, but as long as you have the will to keep going, you can get through anything. Neji chuckled. It doesn't matter what happened in the past. What matters is how you act in the present and prepare for the future. The fourth Hokage was probably the biggest loser of all time when he was younger. He didn't even finish the academy, but he went on to do one of the greatest things ever. Neji glared at the blonde girl, but Naruto could see that he was starting to doubt the idea that losers will always be losers. The kid who couldn't finish the academy went on to become the Yondaime, the hero of Konoha, and of course the Yellow Flash. He didn't give up, and neither will I. Naruto yelled as he punched Neji hard in the head. As he stood there, he started to walk away quietly while grinning widely. How long do you think it will take him to blow himself out of the hole? Give him about 10 seconds, I'd say. Boom. Told you. Neji said as he pulled himself out of his hole, fine then. From now on, I will fight you without holding back. And I will beat you, don't worry. As he stopped a kick to the head, Naruto let out a light laugh. Neji jumped back and got a hand into Naruto's chest. As he dodged another blow, Naruto thought, those are dangerous no matter how strong I am. And if he catches me in his 64 palms, I won't be able to get away. Naruto threw a number of kuni at Neji, making him jump back and into the ones with explosive tags on them. Neji gasped in pain as shrapnel flew towards him after the kunai burst around him. He instinctively put his arm up to cover his eyes. Neji moved out of the way when Naruto lunged at him, but instead of just moving to the side, he grabbed Naruto's arm. When Naruto felt the touch, he changed right away. Neji pooped as he tried to hit the underside of Naruto's arm. Neji was hit from the side right away, and a foot hit the bottom of his ribcage. Neji jumped back, huffing a little, and said, "You're fast. And you're a stubborn know-it-all with a stick up your ass," Naruto said with a grin, urging Neji to attack. It worked, because as Neji ducked, he threw a few kuni and lunges at the blonde. Naruto got hit a few times, but he also gave out a few. Neji said to himself, "I've managed to stop 25% of your chakra flow, but you don't seem to be getting weaker." He changed his eyes so he could see Naruto's chakra system better, and when he did, his eyes grew a little wider at what he saw. It almost looks like he has two sources of chakra going through him. This can't happen. Neji shivered a little as darker spots of chakra seemed to start showing up all over his body. Neji wasn't paying attention, so Naruto made 100 shadow clones witch dog pile on top of him. As the clones fell like rain, Neji ran forward and hit the real Naruto once, but then the clones beat him up. Neji watched as the evil red chakra moved through his body and out of his stomach. As it went, it mixed with the regular blue chakra. Neji tried to protect himself, but he knew he didn't have much chakra left, so he dodged. Neji did his best to avoid getting hit as hands and feet flew everywhere. He was lucky enough to find the real Naruto again and close another point. Neji paid close attention as he came to a decision. The more I cut off, the tighter and darker his chakra becomes. He has another supply, but no one knows where it came from. When Naruto saw that Neji was getting angry, he decided to end the fight quickly and quietly told his clones to knock him out. They did what they were told, so Neji went down quickly. Naruto got rid of his last few clones and panted a lot, making it look like he was also at his limit. As soon as the judge called Naruto the winner, he flopped down into a sitting position and raised his arms in victory. The medic nins ran over to help Neji. Naruto stood up stiffly while the medical team resurrected Neji. Neji got up and limped over to where Naruto was sitting, which made the doctors upset. He looked like he was almost asleep, but he turned down the hospital bed and went over to the blonde who was breathing. When he got to Naruto, he just knelt down and put out his hand. Naruto made it move. When he fell, Neji was about to praise and scare the blonde. He landed right on Naruto's head, and as the gods did their thing, Naruto was the one who had to scream. Hinata gave her cousin an icy look, and everyone looked at her with wide eyes because they could feel the purpose to kill. Neji tried to jump up like Naruto, but his legs gave out. He fell backwards and passed out before he could say anything. Why does this happen every time I fight someone? He screamed through his spitting. He used his hands to wipe his mouth. Everyone was laughing. Hinata gave a look that said she wanted her fair share, but she quickly backed away when she realized everyone was looking at her. She turned a deep shade of red and nervously pressed her fingers together to try to fit in with the walls. Before telling Naruto to leave the field, the evaluator coughed. He did as he was told and walked back up to the balcony, where most of the new people were staring at him, but a few laughs broke up their stares. When he got to the top and sat back down, he got a few punches to the head. Stick with the naked woman jujutsu. Kiba yelled, saying out loud what everyone else was thinking. After everyone had settled down and Neji was taken to the hospital, the examiner told them that Sasuke would be disqualified if he didn't show up soon. Now all I have to do is wait. Naruto looked up to where the cages were. I know you're still alive, you jerk, but you won't be able to kill as many people this time. I promise. Haku said, all right, class. As he tapped the chalk on the board that was attached to a log on the training ground. Haku turned and started writing things on the board. He said, I assume you all know why you're here and what we're going to learn, so I'll get right to it. Team 7 looked nervously at each other while Jiraiya watched them from a tree nearby. Now, to make a good innuendo, you need to know its style. For your innuendo to work, you need to make sure it fits with the rest of the sentence. If it doesn't, the whole thing will be awkward, Haku said as he drew a chart on the chalkboard. If you don't know much about innuendos, it can be hard to keep up, but please do your best. Now then, an innuendo must have a certain rhythm in how it comes at you through a sentence. You don't want to go too fast or too slow, or your sentences might get stuck together. Naruto's cheeks turned a little pink as Haku went on. Sakura's eyes got big, and Sasuke thought he heard laughing in the trees, so he looked up. As a way to make people laugh, it should stand straight and get inside their heads. You might not understand these ideas at first, but the more you try them out, the more you'll get it. Sakura passed out, her face turning bright red. The thing is, not everyone can do innuendos right because it takes a bit of oral skill to say them smoothly. If you use innuendos right, it can be an uplifting experience that makes the person you were talking to happy. Haku nodded to himself as he looked at his students. As he kept listening, Sasuke's eye kept moving all over the place. He asked himself, why am I still sitting here? Finally, innuendos are often funniest when no one is looking for them, Haku said. When no one spoke up, he smiled and asked, should I keep going? Naruto and Sasuke both yelled, "No!" at the same time and ran away. Sasuke growled, "The next time I see Kakashi, I'm going to kill him for being late today." Naruto nodded to show he agreed. Up in the tree, Jiraiya was crying so hard that blood was coming out of his nose. He said with a smile, "I think I've found my next student." Kankuro said, "I quit," when the tester called his name. Shino just shrugged and started walking back up the stairs to where he had been standing just a few minutes earlier. People watching the battle were yelling and throwing things in the general direction of the puppet master. "Well, that wasn't very exciting," Kiba muttered. Naruto grinned and said, "I thought that was the best one so far." "It was over before it even started. I want to see more action," Kiba said with a snort. Naruto's eyes rolled, and then he closed them. Shikamaru yawned as his name was called. "This is really too much trouble," he said as he leaned on the fence and looked down at the Sandnin waiting below. He didn't get to finish because Naruto kicked him off the balcony. Shikamaru fell, and when he hit the ground, he just glared up at the blonde. The crowd started to boo again, and things started to fall on the lazy genin. As people started to yell, he muttered, "Troublesome. Might as well finish this up." As he sat on his bed, Sasuke did nothing but look at the stuffed bear. The bear's head then turned to the right, making Sasuke's eye twitch. He was back to trying to figure out how to get out of his room, which was like a jail. The bear had turned an old paper tube into an air gun and could now shoot socks and other small pieces of clothing at him if he moved. He had, however, made some progress by slowly getting rid of everything that could be used as a weapon. He knew that if he threw something out of his room, it no longer belonged to him. Since cloth doesn't carry electricity, it was easy to throw them out. He tried to jump out of the opening without touching the frame, but he still got zapped, giving him a very stylish new hairstyle, which he of course fixed as soon as he could reach his comb. He gave the bear another angry look, and the bear knew he was after it. He could win if he could get that evil possessed toy out of his room. After all, the toy animal seemed to be in charge of everything. He put the broom on the ground and moved carefully towards the bear. As the bear got closer, he seemed to tighten up. The stuffed animal was ready to shoot the sock gun, but he still got closer. As he got close, the bear shot a few things at him, but Sasuke used the broom to knock them out the door. The bear had no more bullets and knew it was caught. Sasuke jumped off the bed and hit the bear, sending it out the door and into the hallway. It tried to stand up once, but fell. Sasuke smirked. He won. He put the broom on the bed and went to the door without much thought. He could feel the static in the air as he got close to it, so he stopped suddenly before he could step through it. He took a metal hanger and kicked it into the frame with care. "BZT," said the hanger. He yelled, "Damn it!" at the top of his lungs. He was so angry that he was about to set his house on fire, damn the consequences. In the corner of his eye, he saw something move. He turned to it quickly and saw his trusty broom come to life. The now bad broom came close and looked like it was going to hit him. Beep, 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 beep. Sasuke almost screamed as he jumped at his alarm clock and knocked it off his nightstand. The broom fell to the floor with a hollow sound, and the hanger stopped throwing sparks, though that was partly because it had melted into the wooden floor. Sasuke stopped hitting the alarm clock and walked over to the door and put his hand through it. Nothing. He let out a tense sigh of relief and started rushing around to get ready for the Chunin tests. Within 5 minutes, he was ready and running as fast as he could out the door with an apple for breakfast. He couldn't help but notice how empty everything was as he ran through the streets of Konoha. He knew that most people would be at the tests and not at the games, but the strange silence seemed to give him chills. Even places he knew would be open most of the time no matter what were closed. He caught a glimpse of an Anbu running, but it quickly vanished in a cloud of smoke and went wherever it is that Anbu go. Even though there was no one around, the anxiety in the air made him tense up. Soon, he could see the Colosseum, which made him want to run faster. As soon as he ran through the door for spectators and into the stadium, he looked around desperately for a way up to the balcony or the battlefield. He saw a set of stairs that let light in and chose to take them. As he ran up the stairs and out into the open, he never stopped to think about who might be there. So, the black-haired nin ran into Haku, who was walking back to where Naruto was sitting. The two rolled right into Naruto, who was stretching, and knocked him over on his side. As soon as he got up, he saw what had knocked him down. Well, "Sasuke, you sure know how to get in." As he pushed Haku off of him, Sasuke let out a growl. Haku brushed himself off and said, "You don't have to be so rough, and you didn't have to throw yourself at me. I would have been happy to make a way for you." "So, what took you so long?" Naruto asked with a small smirk. "And why are your shorts on inside out?" Naruto's smile grew. "And is that a pajama shirt?" Naruto laughed as he looked at the light blue shirt with Z's written diagonally across it. "Shut up, you idiot. At least I can get dressed and get here on time every morning." Naruto stuck out his tongue. Then, Sasuke decided to pay no attention to the woman for the rest of the test. Sasuke let himself loosen up a bit as he watched Shikamaru and Temiri down below. "I quit," Shikamaru said out of the blue, making most of the people around him start to yell. Naruto just stood next to Sasuke and said, "Guess you have to fight Gaara now." Both genin watched as the two below them cleared the fighting field. "Give him some space if he starts to go crazy," Naruto said in a low voice that only Sasuke could hear, making him look at the blonde. Naruto looked across the field to where Gaara was sitting in a tree. He said, "Well, good luck," and then he went to talk to his white-haired sensei. "So, are you ready?" Naruto asked Sannin with a serious tone as he walked up to him. Gaara gave the Hokage a relaxed look before watching Sasuke's match start. "Well, let's put it this way. If I said yes, I'd be lying." The ninja with white hair sighed. When Naruto heard that the old man was serious, he turned away from the fight. His voice didn't sound like he was joking around. It was just unsure. "So if things go the way I think they will, you call Gamabunta," Naruto said, moving to get more comfortable. Gaara started to argue, but he quickly shut his mouth when he realized what the girl was trying to say. He asked, "Do you think you'll need to call Kyuubi then?" Naruto sighed and said, "Probably. Even though I've been fighting for years, I don't think I'd be able to stop him for long if he used Shukaku's power," Naruto told the older man. "Demon chakra doesn't make you tired quickly." Gaara nodded thoughtfully. As he pulled himself up, he said, "Well, I guess it's time for me to get in place." "Good luck, kid," he said, and then he left. Naruto looked down at the fight field and saw Sasuke fly around Gaara, dodging sandblasts as he went. Kyuubi said, 5 minutes until the show, which was what Naruto was thinking. Kyuubi told Naruto as he got up and jumped out of the tree to get back into the stadium, "Try not to worry too much about everyone else. Distractions are never good when fighting." Naruto walked over to where Sakura was cheering for Sasuke and stood there. When Naruto came back, Sakura gave him a dirty look and went on a rant about how rude it was of him not to help his friend. Naruto paid her no attention and kept walking along the balcony. Sakura stopped her rant and looked at the blonde, who seemed to be wondering what was wrong, but she was more focused on cheering for the Uchiha. Naruto heaved a sigh and tried to calm down. He had to be all set. He had to be able to find out if Kabuto or Orochimaru were nearby. When he looked around with his mind's eye and found nothing, he let out a small sigh, which got Shikamaru's attention. Shikamaru looked at the blonde with great interest. He had never seen Naruto be so calm and focused. Well, except for when he fell asleep in class, but he knew Naruto was awake. Does he have something to worry about? He was confused as he watched the blonde tighten up and then relax again. Shikamaru took a quick look at the stadium, where Gaara was buried in sand and Sasuke was running fast. Shikamaru sat down next to the blonde and looked around the stadium. Taking a quick note of how many Anbu were around and how most of the Jonin looked like they were on guard. He saw a Chunin nervously looking around at the people in the stands. Then, after swallowing a lump in his throat, he got his bearings and went on his way. It looks like Naruto isn't the only one keeping watch. Shikamaru sighed and turned to look at the blonde from the side. "So, what's everyone so worried about?" He whispered so that only Naruto could hear him. Naruto opened one eye and gave his friend with the wild hair a small grin. "I was wondering when you'd notice," Shikamaru said, arching his face to get the blonde to go on. "Well, to put it simply, an invasion could happen during the exams," Naruto said in a flat tone. Shikamaru's eyes widened. "Then I guess it's going to happen soon, since everyone looks like they're ready to jump at the first thing that moves." "What a pain," Shikamaru said with a sigh of frustration. Naruto pointed to Sasuke and Gaara and said, "They think it will happen during this fight." Shikamaru didn't like the idea of having to fight again, but he stopped himself when he had an idea. He asked in a simple way, "How do you know this?" Naruto laughed as he said, "A perverted toad told me." "But, for obvious reasons, most genin were not told about this," Naruto said. Shikamaru nodded thoughtfully. "If the genin knew, they would, A. not fight as hard in the tests because they would want to save energy in case they were attacked later, and they might let Konoha know that they knew. B. If they don't have much experience, they won't be able to hide how scared they are. C. If they knew WHO was going to attack, they would probably stare or keep looking in the general direction of the enemy. All of this meant that they were more likely to let Konoha keep any advantage they had." Shikamaru looked at Naruto from the side and asked, "So, what do they want me to do? I know you wouldn't tell me about this if I wasn't needed for something. You don't just tell people things like this so they can sit back and watch. Well, you're the best at making plans, so if and when things start to happen, they were hoping you'd be able to get the other genin to fight or run away to safety," Naruto said, quietly cursing the small slip of the tongue. Shikamaru raised a brow but nodded. He was going to ask the girl a question for which he didn't know the answer and didn't have a lot of ways to find it on his own. At least, it's not easy. As Naruto opened his mouth to speak, he felt his chakra rise and saw feathers fall from the sky. Shikamaru sighed and quickly took steps to protect himself from what they were doing. When Naruto looked over at the girl, he saw that she seemed to be dead. Naruto slowly opened one eye just enough to see what was going on without making anyone else aware that he was awake. "It looks like the show is about to start." Seeing Shikamaru grumble and fall over told him that the lazy ninja was probably thinking the same thing he was. Play dead. Or asleep, depending on the situation. If an enemy ninja came to check on them, they would think that the genjutsu had put them under its spell and that they were too weak to deal with. Naruto didn't get up until he was sure that Gaara had been taken away by the Sand Brothers. When Naruto took a quick look around, he saw a few sound nin fall into a trap they had set on the pitch and quietly laughed. It was none other than. Who was the leaf nin who set it off? A random Anbu. Most of the traps they set up looked more like jutsus than traps, so Konoha would think they were caught off guard. Naruto ran as fast as he could in the direction he thought Gaara was. Not long after Naruto left, Pakken bit Shikamaru to wake him up. "Well, it's been a long time since we had to really fight Gaara, huh?" Kyuubi said as they got closer to the place where they would fight. "If I remember right, Sasuke should already be there, fighting Gaara," Naruto thought as he ran. "I hope Sakura won't come out here this time." Kyuubi said with a lick of his lips, "Gaara isn't making it hard to find him, is he? I'm pretty sure any villager could feel that." Naruto gave a small smile when the foxes tried to keep him calm and level-headed. "Aren't you going to have fun with this?" "Probably," the fox said with a smile, "and don't worry, I'll be careful." The fox added with a snort, knowing what was going through his container's thoughts, "Don't worry, I'll be careful." About 5 minutes later, Naruto saw Gaara half transformed and Sasuke panting. As Naruto pointed to him, Sasuke let out a low, angry growl. "Nothing works on this guy. Any attempt is just pushed back." Sasuke half yelled. "So I guess that means you could use a hand," Naruto said with a nod. "As much as I hate to admit it." Sasuke's words fell off as he and his partner had to jump away from a sand attack and land on a nearby tree branch to hide in the leaves. "Are you done already? Mom wants your blood." Gaara laughed and screamed as she ran up into the trees. "You have a thought?" Sasuke asked, trying to speak as quietly as possible so as not to give away where they were. "Yes, a couple, but one of them is a last resort," Naruto said almost in a whisper. "We need to try to hit him directly and stop him from changing. You go left and I'll go right. Let's try to overwhelm him." Sasuke nodded, understanding the plan. "When you see an opening, take it." Naruto jumped quickly and quietly from one tree to another. Gaara kept laughing about taking their blood. "I can smell your fear." He sneered as he turned towards Naruto. Naruto smiled as he made about 100 clones that all jumped out and attacked. Gaara easily pushed most of the clones away, dispelling them. The few that got away threw a lot of kuni at the red head. With a yell of defiance, Sand easily got rid of the remaining clones. Almost as soon as the last clone was gone, Sasuke's fireball engulfed Gaara in flames. As the roar of the flames died down, Gaara's laughter intensified. Naruto looked to Sasuke, who had his mouth slightly open as he saw that his target was encased in a cocoon of sand. As the cocoon broke away, it revealed a fully transformed Gaara. His gold and black eyes narrowed as drool lobbed out of his open mouth. Raising a hand, he lashed out, blasting sand at Sasuke faster than the black-haired nin could dodge. Sasuke ran into a tree, but he got up quickly and jumped up to where the real Naruto was hiding. The real Naruto was watching the blood clone fight Gaara below. "Who is this guy?" Sasuke heaved and grabbed his shoulder, which was bleeding. Naruto's only reaction was a sad smile, which made Sasuke look at him funny. "Okay, so what's plan B?" Sasuke asked with a small frown as the blood clone was being killed. Naruto opened his mouth to answer, but he stopped dead when he caught a glimpse of something he didn't want to see. What he saw was worse than anything he could have imagined. When he turned to look at the new person, the blonde's face got a lot paler. Hinata? Hinata? Naruto's mouth was open in shock. After he calmed down, he asked, "What are you doing here?" "Somewhat. Sakura and I saw you run off after Gaara, and she said she was going to come after you, but I told her I would instead," Hinata said, a little surprised by Naruto's worried look when he saw her. Naruto let out a sigh and looked at Gaara. "Well, we could use your eyes, so can you tell us anything about him?" Naruto asked, even though he already knew the answer. Hinata nodded, eager to help, and turned on her Byakugan right away. It only took Hinata 5 seconds to see Gaara through the woods. When she did, she turned her attention to him. She gasped at what she saw, which made Sasuke raise an eyebrow. He asked, "What is it?" This startled Hinata and made her look away from Gaara. Hinata looked back at Gaara and said, "His chakra. It almost looks like it's being overloaded or overrun. It's almost like something else is pushing his chakra out of the way." Naruto agreed because he knew what it meant. Sasuke, on the other hand, could only stare in shock. Another chakra pushing through? It made him think about what the curse seal could do. Even though that mark wasn't nearly as powerful as this one. "I wish I had something like that." Naruto's eyes hardened as he watched Gaara destroy another clone. "How much of the other chakra is flooding his system?" he asked. "It looks like about half of them are being overpowered," Hinata said after a quick glance back. It was strange to look at Gaara's chakra coils, and it made her feel. Even though it was horrible to see, she couldn't stop looking. Naruto slammed his fist into his open hand and said, "Okay, we need a new plan." He asked, cringing as he heard a clone scream in pain, "Any ideas?" "What about?" Sasuke started, but was cut off by a strand of sand that was thrown at him. A number of new bunchins were made by Naruto. Naruto yelled, "Distract him in any way you can." As he and Hinata jumped into Sasuke's new hiding place. The clones nodded to each other and then smiled. They had a plan that they didn't say out loud, which was to hide in the area around Gaara. Sasuke growled, "We can't hide here forever. Can't you go with your last option plan?" Sasuke laughed at the idea that the blonde might actually have something that could handle this. "Beat the monster." "No, it's too dangerous." "Last resort is called that for a reason," Naruto said without even looking at Sasuke. Hinata tried not to show how worried she was. "Maybe I could try blocking his chakra," she said. Naruto seemed unsure because he didn't want to put Hinata in danger. Before Naruto could answer, Gaara yelled, "Come out, come out. I won't hurt you. Promise?" A clone popped out of a tree and showed itself to Gaara. Gaara turned around and used his sand to crush the clone. Even though Gaara knew it was a copy, he laughed when it started to bleed. "Hey, that wasn't very nice," said a standing clone. The clone said, "You did say you wouldn't hurt him." Gaara crushed it, just like he had done with the first one. "You are a very violent person, do you know that?" Gaara yelled, "Die!" and leapt at the clone with his sandy arms spread out wide. He wanted to feel the clone's bones break. "My clones are idiots." Naruto groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose. "They do look like the person who made them," Sasuke said with pride. Hinata laughed because she knew Naruto had opened himself up to that kind of statement. Naruto glared at Sasuke and said, "I'll try to get you as close as I can, and then you close him off as much as possible." Hinata nodded and took a deep breath to get ready. Sasuke went left, Hinata went right, and Naruto went straight for Gaara. A clone jumped out and scared him off while Naruto went in to try to hit him in the head with a punch. He was able to throw and hit the punch he wanted, but Gaara's sand wrapped around his hand. Gaara laughed as he put sand up Naruto's arm and said, "Got you." Naruto yelled, "Damn it." and used his free hand to look through the bag on his weapon. As soon as he found what he was looking for, however, there was a loud blast. Naruto was freed when Sasuke's tagged kunai hit Gaara in the shoulder. Hinata rushed in and tried to seal off a few chakra points, but Gaara saw the attack coming and used his sand to push her away, sending her into a tree. But Hinata got better right away, which made Naruto feel better because he knew she wasn't hurt too badly. After escaping yet another sand attack, Naruto threw the weapon he was holding. The three-pointed kunai hit a tree right behind Gaara, but he didn't pay any attention to it. Naruto jumped back into the trees and got another of the specially sharpened kunais ready. Sasuke asked, "What are you doing?" as he wiped a bit of blood from his mouth. Naruto said, "I'm going to try something I've never done before and I'm not sure will work." He threw one kunai into the ground and the other into a bush above Gaara's head. When Naruto was making the hand signs, he felt strangely tense. He mumbled, "Please work," as he finished the last one and grabbed Sasuke's wrist. When Sasuke felt Naruto's chakra enter his body, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. As soon as he felt it start to move up his arm, he felt a pull, as if Naruto were pulling him from all directions at once. Gaara's sand must have hit a nearby tree, Sasuke thought, because he heard a soft snap and closed his eyes to prepare for a hit. When Sasuke opened his eyes again, he didn't know where he was. Naruto cheered off to the side, "It worked. And it didn't even hurt." Naruto grinned. They were now in the tree right above where Gaara was fighting swarms of clones. Naruto stopped Sasuke from asking the obvious question when he turned to him with his mouth open. He just said, "Later," and jumped down to where he saw Hinata hiding. Naruto saw that she was bleeding from a cut on her face when he got to her. "I tried to attack him with the swarm of clones," she said when she saw the way he was looking at her. Naruto asked, "Do you need to rest? Don't push yourself too hard." Hinata gave a nod. "I need to fight to show that I can. I want you to know that I can do this." Naruto grudgingly agreed, even though his eyes showed worry. "Okay, I've got an idea." Orochimaru. Sarutobi said with a sad shake of the head as he faced his crazy student. The two were standing in the middle of the town on the roof of a building. Around the two, there was a wall that kept anyone who wasn't already there out. After a moment of quiet, the Hokage said, "You were always the same." When he heard this, Orochimaru laughed. "Familiar," he said with a sneer. "This day has been coming for a long time, and it was good for me that one of your ninja killed my fake in the Forest of Death." The Hokage looked to his side and said, "You're a fool to fight me in my own village." The snake Sannin didn't care, and he kept his full attention on this old teacher. "I wanted to fight you one-on-one, like we used to," he said. "But one of us won't leave this place alive." He lunged at the Hokage with a fire jutsu, but the Hokage easily dodged it, smiling in a sad, nostalgic way. The Hokage said as he used a jutsu of his own, "This old man still has a few tricks left." The scene changed, and there were now half a dozen Anbu and Jiraiya. "You." Orochimaru growled. "It doesn't matter, because this will save me trouble later," said Sannin with a smile. "Now it will really be like old times, since almost all of us will be together again." With that, the battle started up again. 3 Anbu stood outside the barrier and watched the fight going on inside. An Anbu wearing a dog mask turned to his friends Bird and Cat and said, "Wow, I can't believe what I'm seeing. This fight between the great Hokage and 2 of the Sannin could change the course of history," Cat said in amazement. "And we get to see it firsthand." Agreed Dog. Bird said, "To be honest, I'd rather be in there with Rabbit, even though the Anbu were trying to help, but they're just getting in the way of the stronger ninja." Orochimaru used a jutsu to turn the floor into quicksand, or mud, which sucked in half of the Anbu team and crushed them. But then, Sasuke rushed at Gaara with a kunai in his hand and tried to cut off his arm. Gaara just smiled, showing his sandy teeth and drooling more. The kunai hit right on the mark, but it broke because the sand got harder when it hit. Sasuke could no longer protect himself. As he took off from the ground, he made sure he wouldn't fly into any trees. Sasuke grinned and jumped as soon as he hit the ground. So far so good. "I can't believe the Dobi came up with something like this." Sasuke kept throwing different weapons at Gaara, but Gaara just laughed. Sasuke jumped down to the ground and rolled as a squared tree started to fall towards him. Gaara was about to throw a sandy hand at Sasuke when he heard a soft whistle-like noise. Gaara turned around and saw Naruto and Hinata flying towards him. This made him feel confused. Gaara let out a roar and threw both arms at them, but they vanished in a blue and gold flash. When the Sand Nin felt something off to the side, he changed his attack, but the things he sensed went away again. At the same time, they seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. Naruto yelled, "Gotcha!" as Hinata attacked Gaara's back with a lot of strikes. Gaara's body jerked back with each hit, leaving a small mark in the sand. Hinata jumped back and puffed when she was done. "Is that it? Why are you holding back?" the red-headed man asked in a loud voice that rang through the forest. Hinata didn't understand what he was saying or why his sand armor hadn't fallen off or why his chakra points were bound. She still couldn't talk, though, because Gaara just filled the closed points with demon chakra, causing them to open again. How? She sputtered. She didn't know what that weird chakra was, but she knew it wasn't normal. Normal people could also reopen closed points by flooding them, but that was usually so painful and took so much chakra that they would pass out from it, unless they had a lot of extra chakra. This strange chakra, on the other hand, only had to touch the blocks for them to disappear. Gaara teased, "I'll make you use what you've been trying to hide." He turned to Naruto, which made both Hinata and Sasuke give the blonde a quick, strange look. "You seem to be very interested in that girl," Gaara said, and all of a sudden, he seemed calm. Hinata tensed, feeling Naruto's killer intent flare. "Do anything to her and I'll kill you," the message said. If it had been a different time or place, Hinata would have blushed. Sasuke also felt it, and he gave the girl another look. Gaara tried to get Naruto to come to him, and he did. "Mother told me to make you hurt, to make you mad," he said more seriously, smiling as he felt Naruto's chakra start to heat up. "Let go of your anger. And don't hold back your power." Gaara almost yelled as he raised his arms and tilted his head back. What happened next took less than a second. Naruto saw what Gaara was going to do and jumped in right away. Gaara threw his bigger hand at Hinata. He wanted to pin her to a tree and crush her like he did the first time with Sakura. Hinata was scared and stood still, trying to scream but not being able to. She tried to leave, but she couldn't. "Hinata!" Naruto yelled, his voice getting louder with each word. Sasuke was shocked as Naruto flew away from where he was standing and seemed to catch on fire in the middle of a step. Hinata was about to hit Naruto with the sand hand when Naruto jumped in front of her. When Sasuke didn't hear a crash or bones breaking, he looked back where the girl was standing, not knowing he had ever looked away. The sand was held up by Naruto's fire. "No, wait," Sasuke said, and he looked at it more closely with the Sharingan. "It's nothing but chakra." Sasuke was amazed that he could see it so clearly even though he wasn't channeling chakra into his eyes. Hinata was more shocked than anything else. She could see that Naruto's body held a huge amount of energy. The way it was coming out almost made her think of a spring that was wound up so tight that when it was let go, it could only explode. As Sasuke and Hinata thought about what they had seen, only one idea came to mind. A blood limit? Naruto showed that he was ready to kill, which made Gaara laugh. Hinata started running towards Sasuke, and in just a few short jumps she was there. Once Naruto saw that Hinata was out of the way, he threw the sand hand to the side and jumped forward with a claw stretched out. Gaara tried to stop it by putting up a sand wall, but Naruto's chakra cut straight through it. Gaara laughed as he fought the redhead, but it was hard for Hinata and Sasuke to keep their eyes on him. Gaara would try to hit them, but Naruto would block them with the chakra that covered his body like armor. "I won't let you hurt them." Naruto growled, his voice now deep and gruff. As Naruto started to pull out more chakra, a long tendril of energy came out from behind him that looked like a tail, and two more came out of the top of his head that almost looked like long ears. Everyone in the area, except Gaara, got shivers when they heard that Gaara was going to be killed. Even though it was huge, all he did was smile. "If that was said to me, I wouldn't be able to move." Sasuke was very angry. How in the hell did he get so strong? Naruto rushed forward, depending mostly on his speed. He zipped one way and let out an attack, then zipped the other way and tried to claw Gaara. It reminded Sasuke of how Lee had fought the redhead, but Naruto left his mark when he hit the safe layer of sand. Hinata was amazed by how fast Naruto was. She wanted to cheer him on, but she knew that would give away where they were hiding. Sasuke growled because he was tired of just sitting and watching. Then he jumped into the fight. Naruto looked over his shoulder and for a split second, his red eyes went to Sasuke before he nodded. Hinata took a sharp breath when she saw him for the first time. He had red eyes, long teeth that looked like fangs, and the marks on his face looked like they were getting deeper and longer. His face looked sharper and nothing like the round face she had grown to love. Hinata had to agree that he was now looking dangerous. Seeing him like that didn't make her feel any different, though. Still, her heart fluttering, she knew that Naruto was just trying to protect her by looking in his direction. Naruto was right next to Sasuke when he jumped forward. Naruto ran forward, vanished for a moment, and then reappeared in front of Gaara, drawing his attention. So far, Sasuke's plan to stay quiet was working, so he saw his chance and threw his tagged kunai right at Gaara's head. As expected, the sand kept it there, but Gaara didn't notice the tag was on the kunai until the last second. Boom. Naruto smiled as the tag went off. When the smoke cleared, Gaara's face looked like it was dripping sand, not blood. The sand was easy to shape again, and Gaara let out an angry and defiant scream. He yelled, "Enough of this. I'm sick of playing with you." Gaara used his sand to hold the two of them in place while he raised his hands and made a single seal, which made Naruto tense up. Gaara turned to Naruto and said, "You are a good opponent, but I have one question for you before you die." He didn't wait to hear a response before going on. Gaara growled, "Why help them? I can see now that you are just like me, but you still help and even save the people who probably didn't want you to exist." Gaara yelled, "Why do you help them and even put your trust in them?" "You're right about some people, but there are others who can just look past everything," Naruto said softly, making Sasuke raise an eyebrow at the talk he thought the two were having. "You need to find people who are true friends. You fight for yourself, but I fight for my precious people, which is why I will beat you no matter what." Naruto yelled as he finished. Gaara laughed. "So you think your precious people give you power?" he said, turning his head towards where Hinata was hiding. Gaara shouted, "But don't worry. I'll make sure you live long enough to see them die." Before he started to focus his chakra. "You even touch her, and I'll kill you." Naruto screamed, pumping more demon chakra out of anger and anticipation for what he knew was going to happen next. Gaara started to get covered in sand, which grew into a big net around him. Naruto heard Gaara and the monster inside him both say, "Freedom." At the same time, the sand let go of the boys just as they looked up and saw a full-sized Shukaku standing in front of them. "I'm going to take a chance here and say that this is why you put off your secret plan," Sasuke said as he looked up at the big demon with fear. "Yeah," Naruto replied as he watched the monster open its eyes and say how long it had been since it was free. "We should probably get away from its big foot first, though," Naruto said as he jumped up into the woods and away from Shukaku. Sasuke followed, but as soon as they touched down, Shukaku stomped on the ground, causing a wave of sand to come and cover where they had just been standing. Naruto jumped back again when he saw more sand coming towards them. Sasuke, on the other hand, wasn't as lucky. The wave of sand hit him in the head and threw him back into a tree, which knocked him out. Kyuubi snorted as Naruto picked up Sasuke and put him on a branch of a tall tree nearby. Kyuubi, who could read Naruto's mind, said, "Now only the Hyuga will see you summon me." When Naruto looked down at the branch right below him, he saw Hinata looking at what Gaara had become with wide, shaking eyes. "Do it," Naruto told the fox in a simple way. When Hinata turned around, she saw Sasuke sleeping on a tree. Naruto had started to jump up, using shadow clones to help him get higher. He could feel himself getting warmer as he gathered demon power. "You know this is going to hurt a little, right? You've never had to summon me at my full size, let alone half that size, before. Just hurry up," Naruto said with his teeth clenched. Even though Kyuubi, mostly, didn't mean to hurt him, the demon chakra felt like his insides were being torn apart, then put back together, and then torn apart again. Once Kyuubi gave the signal, Naruto started running through hand seals, biting his thumb as he pushed his hand down into the open space below. Hinata watched as Naruto poured the strange red chakra into his body. As she watched the chakra push and gather in Naruto's chakra coils, she started to bite her lower lip. Then she noticed something she had never noticed before. Naruto's chakra coils were much bigger than those of a regular person his age. Or even a Jonin, come to think of it. They seemed to get longer because of the red energy. As Naruto quickly went through hand seals, the energy became spring-like, as if it were waiting for the last seal to be broken so it could all jump forward. The exact same thing happened. The blast was so loud that it was hard to hear, and the smoke that filled the area was almost red. Hinata looked through the fog, and even though her wings were moving quickly, all she could see was a huge mass of chakra. She also didn't have to wait for the smoke to clear before she could see what the mass was. Konohamaru looked up at his master, Iruka-sensei, and asked, "What's wrong?" Iruka-sensei froze in place with a horrified look on his face. "Sensei?" asked another child, pulling the man with scars out of his thinking. Iruka shook his head and tried not to shiver as he said, "And nothing's wrong. I thought I saw a bat." When he looked around the small cave-like place where they were hiding, he saw that most of the older Chunin and Jonin who were there had also frozen. A nearby Anbu, to his left, looked so scared that even his mask couldn't hide it. Mogai asked her friend, "What's up with them?" when she saw that their elders were acting in a strange way. "Maybe they're scared of bats for real," Udon shrugged. Konohamaru said with a huff, "I don't know, and I don't think they're going to tell us either." Kakashi stopped beating up the random sound nin for a moment, Guy standing behind him. Guy only half yelled, "It looks like your student is just as careless as you are, my eternal rival." Even though he would never say it, the presence he felt scared him to death. He wasn't afraid of the girl who carried it, though, because he knew he was just her servant. But, the fox. Guy was sure that if he ever met the Kyuubi in person, he would need a new outfit. "I'm sure Naruto has given this a lot of thought," Kakashi said, trying to stop a chill from running up his spine. He gave a small glance to the side and saw Haku use his needles to stab 3 nin in a row. "As long as that thing stays in one place," Guy said to himself again as a chill ran through him. "I'm sure we'll be fine," Kakashi said with a smile. Even though we knew the devil fox didn't really want to hurt, maim, or kill anyone, its presence. Kakashi shook, but he made it look like he was stretching. "I'm up 58, Kakashi said, grinning behind his mask, while Guy complained that he only had 52. Jiraiya said as he dodged one of Orochimaru's strikes, so the brat did need to use it after all." Orochimaru screamed, "Ah, the Kyuubi's chakra. It fills the air with such a lovely feeling of dread. It's the perfect atmosphere for your death." Bird said in a worried tone, "Wow, it almost feels like the Kyuubi got out." "Maybe the Kyuubi brat is in the middle of an epic battle between demons," Cat teased Bird. Dog snorted. He shook his head and said, as if, "I don't think that kid could even beat an academy student, let alone a demon." Bird said with a shiver, "I've seen him train, but I feel bad for whoever has to deal with the Kyuubi's anger. That kid is probably going to die anyway." "If you ask me, it's a good thing," Dog said with a huff. Cat asked in mock horror, "You don't like the kid?" Dog yelled, "That kid is pure evil. I'm sure of it, and if I'm wrong, may lightning strike me down." Cat and Bird moved away from Dog, who was yelling and raising his arms. Cracking bang. During the fight, a stray lightning jutsu went straight for the Anbu. The dog yelled like a girl and dove out of the way. When the lightning hit the barrier, it broke apart, sending small sparks in all different directions inside the dome. Dog started screaming, "I take it back. I take it back." This made Bird and Cat laugh at. Hinata jumped when the smoke made a loud, booming noise. In less than 2 seconds, a huge red streak shot out and went straight for Gaara. Hinata barely had time to react before the Kyuubi's long tail grabbed the roots of the tree she was standing in and pulled it up. Hinata screamed when she saw it. She was more afraid for her life than ever. Kyuubi held on to Sasuke as the tree rose higher and higher and turned it to face his huge face. Quickly, the tree was pulled out from under them. Now that Sasuke was unconscious, Hinata was holding to him for dear life. As she started to fall, she let out another high-pitched cry. When Sasuke woke up at that time, he was in Hyuga Hinata's arms while she was screaming, and she didn't even notice that he was awake. Not to mention that she was pinching one of his legs so hard that it was cutting off his blood flow. When he looked at her point of view, he passed out again right away. The Kyuubi no Kitsune was right below them, and it looked like it wanted to eat them from where he was standing. Hinata's scream stopped when she hit something solid. When Kyuubi looked at the two on his nose, he got crossed eyes. Hinata started to shake when she saw the big red eyes staring right at her. "Really, girl, do you need to make so much noise?" The fox's words made the air shake. Naruto yelled, "You missed furball," as he panted while standing on Kyuubi's head between his ears. Hinata was glad that he was no longer covered in red chakra and that all of his traits were back to normal. Naruto? Hinata shook her head in surprise and confusion. When people look like ants, it's hard to aim, Kyuubi said. Just be glad I caught your mate at all. Those words made Hinata blush a lot, and many not so pure thoughts went through her mind. When Kyuubi saw the girl's face turn red, he laughed, threw Hinata and Sasuke on his neck, and tilted his head back. Naruto grabbed Hinata by the arm and pulled her up to where he was standing. Hinata half yelled, What is the Kyuubi no Kitsune doing here? To get rid of any other thoughts. Naruto said, I called him, because he didn't know what else to say. Hinata's eyes suddenly grew wide as she asked, Why you called a demon? Hinata started to sweat and said, I thought the Yondaime had killed the Kyuubi. They want you to think that, Naruto said with a sad smile. Naruto turned to look at Shukaku and said, I'll explain later. I promise. She looked worriedly at Sasuke and thought, I thought you had to make a sacrifice to call a demon. When Naruto saw this, he laughed and said, I'll explain later. Wait a minute, he said, and all of a sudden he was very serious and there was no more humor, so there was no more way to talk. Hinata grabbed Sasuke and had a death grip on the fox's fur. As soon as she got a handful of red fur in her hand, the fox took off running toward Shukaku so fast that it was hard to see. Shukaku asked Kyuubi, who was running towards him and throwing a tree at him, Kyuubi. I bet I haven't seen you in a coon's age. Are you going to join in the fun? Then I'll take that as a no, Shukaku laughed out loud. You're carrying people who aren't hurt and don't belong to you. You've always been too soft-hearted. Hinata was puzzled. The Kyuubi has a soft heart? Naruto gave a shrug. Kyuubi asked with his teeth bared, You do realize where your tactics have gotten you, right? Before the sand demon could point out that he, too, was shut away, Kyuubi said, At least I get out every once in a while. Besides, who got 9 tails, Kyuubi teased, flashing his tails like a fan, which made Shukaku growl. Shukaku yelled, Just because you have more tails doesn't mean you're stronger. He then shot giant sand rockets at them. Kyuubi snorted. Yeah, it kind of does, Naruto said with his eyes rolling. Don't worry, I'll make sure he gets what's coming to him. Naruto yelled, Oh, don't start. And put his foot on Kyuubi's head. Shukaku blinked once before continuing his attack. This time, he aimed to hit or slice the fox with his huge hand. Kyuubi tried again. I'll have to watch out for his sandy claws. Shukaku stopped in the middle of his swing, and his eyes seemed to twitch at the joke. Stop talking about that and just attack me. Hinata asked Naruto, So, this is the real Kyuubi, right? Naruto nodded in a way that seemed almost sad. Oh. Someone's getting hot under the collar. Kyuubi pretended to be a cat ready to jump on a mouse by crouching down and wrapping his tails around as many trees as possible. Shukaku half grumbled and half yelled, Era! As he caught a tree that was thrown to him. Kyuubi scolded, Tisk, tisk. Letting your anger get the best of you will be the end of you, as he dodged a wave of sand that was thrown at him. Every damn time. Naruto muttered as Shukaku threw more sand at them. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Shukaku even shot off his arm to grab the people on the fox's back, which left the sand demon open to attack. Painful but effective, Naruto thought, but he didn't want to say it out loud for the fox to hear. When Kyuubi was called, the connection between their minds was also broken. Kyuubi asked, You don't like my dry sense of humor? He jumped right over Shukaku and hit him on the head with his tails, hoping to hit Gaara, but he was obviously too far away. The angry Shukaku let out a roar and threw both of its arms at the big fox. Kyuubi smirked and leapt at Shukaku, locking his claws into what was left of the sand demon's shoulders. Once his hand-like front paws were fastened, Kyuubi clamped his jaws around Shukaku's neck for good measure. Okay, you might want to do something before I loosen my grip, Kyuubi said, talking around the fighting sand demon, who now had his hands back and was trying to rake his own claws down the fox's side. You shouldn't talk with your mouth full, Naruto joked in a sing-song voice as he jumped onto the nose of the angry fox. Kyuubi's eyes got narrower, and he mumbled something that kind of sounded like a threat. When Naruto saw a big blob of spit running down Shukaku's chest, he couldn't help but laugh. Even the sand demon saw it, and that seemed to make him fight even harder. Naruto was able to jump up to where Gaara was sleeping, where the sand only covered half of his body. As Naruto tried to get to Gaara, the sand on Shukaku moved. Naruto got closer to Gaara as he dodged sand waves and didn't stay in one place for more than a split second. As a long strand of sand rose up, Naruto quietly cursed himself for having used up his last engraved kunai and paper seals. Naruto made a few clones to take the hit for him. He jumped away from one sand arm and right into another that was coming up. The clone was easily destroyed by the sand, which went right through it. The hit didn't even slow down the arm. Naruto rolled to the side because he knew he could only make simple shadow clones because almost all of his chakra was used to call Kyuubi. As soon as he got about a foot away from Gaara, the sand under him suddenly rose up and trapped him. Smaller sand-like arms rose up and wrapped around his arms and body, cutting and crushing him as Naruto used the last of his energy to try to pull himself forward. When he pulled his head back, he head-butted Gaara in the face. Naruto's eyes got all messed up, and his head started to pound. He could feel blood dripping down the sides of his face, and the sand hands were letting go. Gaara's eyes fluttered open. Shukaku screamed as Kyuubi freed him. In a last-ditch effort, he swung at the fox, which caught him off guard. With one blow to the side of Kyuubi's head, he cut a gash from its cheek to its shoulder. Kyuubi yelled out in surprise because he felt pain all of a sudden. As soon as Shukaku's claws started to dig into Kyuubi's front paw, he blew up in a shower of sand, sending Naruto, who was only half awake, and Gaara, who was too tired to move, down with it. Kyuubi shot out two tails, and they were both easy for him to catch. Kyuubi brought Naruto and Gaara close to his face so he could focus on them. He held Naruto in one hand and Gaara in the other. Gaara, who was already very tired, panted and turned a little pale when he saw Naruto's monster. The first thing Gaara thought was, how could he beat me? But as soon as Naruto said one simple word, all of the anger and shame he was feeling went away. Thanks. Kyuubi. Naruto shook his head as his vision got worse and worse. At least he could pass out. Gaara, on the other hand, would stay awake even though he was probably in a lot of pain. Kyuubi smiled with his sharp teeth as Gaara looked at the blonde in confusion. You have made friends with your demon? Gaara asked with clenched teeth, showing how shocked and hurt he was. Kyuubi laughed, but he didn't say anything. See what can happen when you forgive people and try. Try again? Naruto laughed but started coughing. He thought in a dry way, probably breathed in some of that sand. Hinata looked over Kyuubi's head at Naruto, her worried face showing. Gaara looked up at her while his head hurt and he winced a little. He looked at her and watched how she moved as she looked at Naruto. Then he looked into her eyes. He had seen her surprise and even fear when Naruto first used his demon's power. Gaara looked into her eyes, hoping to see fear or even cold hatred, but was surprised to find that they were warm. Fear was written all over her face, but not fear of him. But for him? As she looked at the blonde, there was nothing hidden in her eyes except worry and a strange warmth. Hinata saw Gaara's calculating look and locked eyes with him. She no longer looked at Naruto with that strange warmth, but she still didn't hate him. Instead, she was more worried. At one point, I was alone, too, Naruto sighed. But I never gave up on people, and in the end I found people who I know only want the best for me, Naruto said in a simple way. I found my precious people, and if I have to, I will protect them with my life. I know they would do the same for me. Kyuubi gave off a small glow, which made Hinata blink and tighten her grip on the fox's fur out of fear that he would disappear like the sand demon had. Red energy flowed out of Kyuubi and into Naruto's tail, which he was sitting on. This made Naruto smaller. Gaara was interested to see Kyuubi close his own cut enough to stop the flow of blood before he turned his attention to Naruto. I use my friend's power and they use mine. Together, we're stronger than we would be on our own. Naruto's breathing slowed down. Gaara started to talk, but Naruto stopped him. And if you don't know how to make friends, how about I be your first? Naruto asked, tilting his head to look at Gaara and giving him a small smile. Naruto slowly blinked, trying to stay awake just a little bit longer. Gaara bowed his head and asked Naruto out of the corner of his eye, you won't kill me, will you? Gaara felt a little better when the blonde shook his head. Gaara said, then, I'd like to take that offer, as Kyuubi, who was now no bigger than a wagon, put the genin on the ground and laid him on his back. Hey, I thought so. Naruto smiled, shut his eyes, and fell asleep. His legs were now hanging off both sides of the tail-like branch he was lying on. Hinata was now sitting on Kyuubi's neck, and Sasuke was lying on Kyuubi's back in the shape of a U. Hinata still had a death grip on Sasuke's wrist and Kyuubi's fur. Kyuubi turned to face the new person when the wounds on his shoulder and face were all healed. Temari came out of the bushes and moved slowly towards the big fox, shaking as she went. "Gg ga Gaara." She spoke when she saw that the fox was looking at her. Kyuubi tried not to laugh as he showed her a free tail to tell her to take the redhead. "Thank you," Gaara said, looking up at both his sister and the fox. The words felt strange on his tongue. Temari blinked but said nothing. Kyuubi nodded and watched as the Sand Kunoichi picked up her brother and took off in the exact opposite way. "Coward," Kyuubi said as he turned and trotted towards the village. He lightly wrapped his tail around Naruto to keep the blonde from falling off. Hinata started to say, but Kyuubi put a tail around her mouth and shut her up. When he moved the tail, she started to spit out free pieces of red fur. Kyuubi said softly, "I'm not going to answer anything. That's up to the kid, whenever he decides to wake up. I'll lead you all to the edge of the village, but I won't carry you out of the woods." Kyuubi looked at Hinata, who nodded to show that she understood. If someone from the village saw Kyuubi walking around, everything would go crazy. "I want you to go get help. If you can find Tsunade, that would be best, but don't worry if you can't. I'll take care of these two until you come back, and what I do will depend on who you bring back." Hinata nodded again. Hinata jumped off when they got to the edge of the forest. Even though she was hurt and bruised, she would do anything to help Naruto. Oh, and Sasuke was also in trouble. Tsunade snarled in anger as she punched another Soundnin who had poked her in the chest. The guy hit 3 other people and knocked them back, too. She was happy that they didn't get back up, and then she went back to helping the hurt Konoha Nin and Anbu fighters get better. None of them had more than a broken bone or 2, which was a good thing. The worst injuries were whiplash and a pinched nerve that caused a small amount of weakness. When she heard her name, she was about to move on to the next Nin. When she turned to look, she saw a hurt-looking Hinata yelling for help. Tsunade went to help her right away and told a close medic Nin to cover for her. Even though the girl didn't want to, Tsunade sat her down and started working while holding a finger in front of Hinata's mouth to keep her from talking. Hinata's eye twitched, and she pushed the Sanin's hand away because everyone kept talking over her. Hinata yelled as loudly as she could, "It's not me, it's Naruto." This made all the doctors look at the pale-eyed girl. Before Tsunade could figure out what the younger girl had said, she had to let her ears stop ringing and blink a few times. "Show me right away," Tsunade said, grabbing half of Hinata under her arm and lifting the Hyuga off the ground. After Tsunade let the girl go, they ran back into the woods where the girl had come from. Tsunade saw Naruto and Sasuke right away, but she didn't care that Kyuubi was standing right over them. After looking at them both, she felt a little better. "Come on," she said to Hinata as she turned around. "We should take them to the hospital," she said as she picked up Naruto and threw the limp blonde over her shoulder. Then she grabbed Sasuke. She held the dark-haired teenager carefully with her other arm and then turned back towards the hospital. Kyuubi looked sad and asked, "What? Not even a hello?" Tsunade said, without even looking at the fox, "There's a Soundnin near the north wall who uses birds as summons." "Okay, I'll take it," the mighty Kyuubi no Kitsune said. Then it ran off into the bush to try to catch something to eat. Hinata looked at Naruto and asked, "He'll be fine, right?" "Yes, his biggest worry is running out of chakra. This might not be a big deal for a normal ninja, but as you know, Naruto has a lot of chakra. For his body to suddenly not have all that energy." Tsunade trailed off, knowing Hinata would fill in the rest. Hinata nodded to show that she understood. He also has a few broken ribs, a small crack in his skull, and a hairline fracture in his right arm. Sasuke, on the other hand, is mostly bruised. When they got to the hospital and checked in, Hinata went to the room where they were recovering and waited for them to come back. Tsunade gave her a quick look over. She was too tired to see them brought into the room, though, because she was so tired herself. She fell asleep in the bed that Naruto should have been in. When the nurses came back, they just shrugged, carefully put the blonde next to her, covered both of them up, and left. Hinata cuddled up to Naruto's left arm because she could feel a heat source nearby. She turned her head until it fit comfortably in the crook of Naruto's neck. Naruto smiled, even though he was asleep and had no idea what was going on around him. Sasuke mumbled something in his sleep, or maybe he started snoring, but the beeping of the monitors shut it out. A cloud of smoke hung over the tops of the trees, and almost every building fell apart. Every part of the once beautiful town was broken in some way. Even though most buildings were still standing, and some only needed small fixes, the bigger ones needed a lot of work. The last signs of the war were being cleaned up, and the most hated jobs were being done. There were a lot of deaths. As another dead body was brought by on a cart, Tsunade bowed her head out of respect. Yes, but not as high as it could have or would have been, Gaara said seriously. Don't forget that the third one is still alive, either. But just in time. Tsunade snapped, but the white-haired Sannin made her back up and turn away. Gaara sighed deeply and said, "You took care of him, so you know better than anyone if he'll ever be able to walk again, let alone fight. But we can be thankful that at least so many lives were saved." The old man said this as he turned to look at the damage in the town. "I agree with you, but since Orochimaru is still alive, there is still a risk of another attack. At least they couldn't hit us as hard as we hit them. Orochimaru is missing an arm, so that will slow him down at the very least." "We can only hope," Tsunade said with a heavy sigh as she looked up at the sky. All she wanted to do was drink a bottle of sake. Sakura held her flowers tightly and looked up at the huge hospital building. As she walked into the building, she shook her head. She couldn't believe what had happened in the last few hours. All of the people who had died were to have a big funeral, all of her coworkers were in the hospital for one reason or another, and worst of all, she felt like she hadn't even done much. Even though she did what she could with what little she knew about first aid, she still needed help to keep herself safe while she worked. She shook her head again to try to get these thoughts out of her head. Then, she asked the nurse at the front desk where her teammates were before walking up the hospital steps. She went to her sensei's room first, where she saw him sitting on the end of his bed and staring at the nurse who was trying to check his wounds. "It doesn't matter how good you feel, you can't leave until I say you're well enough to move around," the nurse yelled, almost breaking her pencil. "I broke my arm, got a few puncture cuts, and hurt a lot of muscles. I'm sure that this room could be used in a better way." Kakashi argued, and his eye got smaller. Sakura didn't want to get in the middle of the fight, so she just left a few flowers on the bedside table and left without saying anything. As she went to Haku, she sighed and opened his room to find the nin sleeping peacefully. She gave a small smile when she saw that he wasn't hurt as badly as she had feared. She stayed for a few minutes and gave Haku a few flowers before moving on to her last stop. When she opened the door to the last room she wanted to see, she couldn't help but laugh a little when she saw Hinata cuddled up to Naruto. Sasuke was in the bed with them, but he was facing away from them. Sakura put some flowers on Naruto's nightstand and then went to see Sasuke's. As she got closer, he woke up and turned his head to glare at her as she gave him the flowers. Sasuke huffed as he turned to look at the nin with the pink hair. "You didn't get hurt too badly, did you, Sasuke?" She spoke softly while looking at his wounds. The way Sasuke looked changed as he sat on Naruto's bed for a moment before he ran over Sakura. The dark-haired nin pushed himself up into a sitting position with a grunt. He instantly regretted his choice as a rush of blood to his head made the room spin. "Sasuke?" Sakura tried again, but she didn't really like how the other teen looked. "No." Sasuke almost threw up, and his eyes darted from one of Sakura's eyes to the other as they did so. Sasuke huffed again and turned to look out the window. Sakura blinked but didn't press. When she looked at Naruto's body, which was covered in blood-stained bandages, she couldn't help but wonder what he had done to get half of those cuts. Sasuke turned around to look at Sakura's back, which was now facing him. "How did that idiot beat Gaara when I could barely make a dent in his sand?" When Naruto first saw Hinata curled up with Naruto, his eyes grew wider. That Hyuga. She must have been able to seal up that strange chakra. That would explain it. The look in Sasuke's eyes got even worse. There's no way Dobi could have beaten that monster on his own. Sasuke huffed as he became more and more sure that was the best way to solve the problem. No matter how he looked at it, though, everything came down to one thing and one thing only. Naruto beat someone who couldn't even hurt him. It didn't matter if he had help or not. It felt like Naruto was moving faster than he really was. Sasuke clenched his hands as he thought about how weak he must be if the dropout was better than him. "Okay?" Sakura's voice kept going back and forth about waking Sasuke up from his trance. He looked at her for a moment, blinked once, and then gave his angry answer. Whatever. Sakura had a moment where she looked worried, but she quickly covered it up by shaking her head for the 100th time today. Let me know if you want to talk. She said this as she was walking to the door, knowing that Sasuke didn't just talk about his problems. Sakura left without saying anything else. Sasuke huffed and sighed before the door shut behind her. With a big sigh, she started the long walk back to where she knew Tsunade was still stationed. Her visit with her team hadn't gone as well as she'd hoped. Sasuke kept staring with his eyes like knives at the door until he heard Sakura's footsteps leave the hallway for good. Naruto moved around while he was sleeping. He tilted his head back a little and pulled his nose out of Hinata's hair. Sasuke looked at the two of them for a moment before grinding his teeth and huffing again as he fell back into his pillow. That fool is hiding something, which I will make him tell me, Sasuke said to himself with a smirk that was almost evil. But Jiraiya. You must. The old man began to argue, but he was stopped. No, I don't want the job, Jiraiya told the old man and woman as he turned his back on them. I don't want to stand in for anyone. Jiraiya slightly turned his head to look back at the two. Didn't Tsunade talk to you yet? I heard that she wanted to take over. The old woman tilted her head a little bit, like a dog might. But the Hokage told you right away to. Well, when he wakes up again, tell him I turned him down. Jiraiya pinched the bridge of his nose and looked around for someone or something he could pay attention to. He quickly went over to the three staggering ninja he saw in the rubble of what used to be the market street and took the dead load they were carrying. He gave the Jonin a serious look and then walked towards the makeshift grave. It doesn't look like there are too many more people who can't be found, Jonin said. I'm tired. I'm just glad the sound ninja were thrown out so quickly, said the second guy, who was just as tired as the first. Jiraiya said, yes, and kept walking. Naruto groaned and opened his eyes slowly. He didn't know how long he'd been out, but he knew he'd rather sleep again. It was getting dark outside, and everything in the hospital room cast long shadows and had an orange glow. Naruto didn't turn his head to look around, so he just looked around the room with his eyes. He noticed a few things as he did this. One was a bunch of flowers by his bed, and the other was the look Sasuke was giving him at the moment. Naruto gave the black-haired kid a slow blink as he looked at him. Then, he turned his head reluctantly to get a better look at what Sasuke was showing him. When Sasuke saw Naruto move, he made a sound that was a cross between a growl and a huff. How? Sasuke's words were more of an order than a question, and his voice showed how angry he was. Naruto moaned because he wasn't sure if he could move his mouth or not. He put his head back down on the pillow and hissed a little bit in pain. Naruto knew that Sasuke had questions he wanted answered, but his brain wasn't working as well as it should have been, so he missed half of what Sasuke asked. Naruto thought it would be better to change the subject than to answer in his confused state, so he half mumbled, I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad. He slowly closed his eyes. Damn it. You have to answer. Sasuke yelled in anger. I'd rather have you kill me than me kill you anyway. Naruto said something softly as he was about to pass out again. You. Sasuke started to yell, but was caught off guard by what the girl said. The fact that Naruto, of all people, was able to stop him from going on his quest. It made him madder than the fact that Gaara had been beaten by a blonde when he had failed. Naruto, you have to tell me. Sasuke huffed and laid back down, doing his best not to grind his teeth in anger. One way or the other.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.